Welcome, dear viewers. Today, I want to present you a fascinating story about the most famous detective of all time, Sherlock Holmes. In this exclusive audio story, called The Secret of Chinese Silk, you will travel into the world of secrets, ancient legends and dangerous riddles. Enjoy listening, and may your deduction be as sharp as that of Mr. Holmes himself. Chapter 1. The Blood-Stained Pattern. London was shrouded in its eternal fogs as Dr. John Watson sat by the fireplace in our sitting room on Baker Street. Holmes, as usual, reclined on his favorite sofa with a pipe between his teeth, releasing intricate coils of smoke that slowly dissolved into the air. It seemed nothing could disturb this silence until the sound of footsteps echoed up the stairs. The door swung open abruptly, revealing Lestrade on the threshold, his face a mix of anxiety and excitement. He was pale, and his coat was damp from the November mist. "Mr. Holmes," he began without preamble, "I know you prefer complex cases, but this is something extraordinary." Holmes slightly raised himself on the sofa, his eyes gleaming with interest. "Continue, Inspector," he said, his voice carrying its usual cold courtesy. "What is so extraordinary about it?" Lestrade drew a long bundle from his inner pocket and laid it on the table before us. Then, carefully, he unwrapped it, revealing a roll of Chinese silk covered in strange patterns. But what truly caught our attention were the dark brown stains that seemed to pulse in the firelight. "It's blood, Mr. Holmes," Lestrade whispered hoarsely. "And that's not all. Look at these symbols." We both leaned over the silk. Ancient hieroglyphs were embroidered on its surface, intertwined in an intricate design. Yet one symbol stood out, a massive dragon, its scales rendered so skillfully they appeared three-dimensional. As I studied it closely, an odd unease crept over me, as if the dragon might spring to life at any moment. "Where did you find this?" Holmes asked, running his fingers along the fabric's edge. "At the docks," Lestrade replied. "The roll was discovered in an abandoned warehouse, next to the body of a customs officer. He was found this morning. But the most intriguing part isn't just the silk. We also found a note with it." The inspector handed over a small scrap of paper bearing a single word, asterisk asterisk last. Asterisk asterisk. The letters were written in a neat, almost childlike hand, yet they carried an eerie certainty. "Last," I repeated, puzzled. "That is precisely what we must determine," Holmes said, rising from the sofa. "Inspector, where exactly was this warehouse located?" "By the river, near where ships from Asia usually dock," Lestrade answered. "The warehouse belongs to a company that imports silk and other goods." "Interesting," Holmes murmured, donning his coat. "Doctor, fetch your hat. We are going to the docks." Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The fog seemed to deepen the darkness as we arrived at the scene. The old warehouse looked as though it had long been abandoned. The boards on the windows sagged, and parts of the roof had caved in. Police lanterns cast an eerie glow around the area. Inside, we were met with the smell of dampness and mold. Signs of a struggle were evident: overturned crates, scattered papers, and trails of blood leading to the far corner of the room. There, beside the wreckage of an old chest, lay the body. I recognized the posture at once, arms outstretched, as if the man had been grasping for something in his final moments. His throat was slit, I observed after examining him. Death occurred approximately 12 hours ago. "Meaning it happened at night," Holmes added, scrutinizing the floor around the body. "Do you see these marks? There was another person here, likely the one who brought the silk." I looked down and noticed faint tracks leading toward the exit. "You believe the killer or killers knew why they were here?" I asked. "Undoubtedly," Holmes replied. "The question is what they were searching for. This silk isn't just merchandise. It's a key to something far greater." He stood and, retrieving his magnifying glass, moved toward the wall where faint scratches were visible. Upon closer inspection, I realized they were the same hieroglyphs as those on the silk. "This is a message," Holmes said, tracing the symbols with his finger. "Someone wanted us to find this." "But who?" Lestrade asked. "And why now?" "That is what we must uncover," Holmes replied. "However, I suspect we are dealing with an ancient secret one tied not only to this warehouse, but to an entire smuggling network, possibly even a secret society guarding lost knowledge." On our way back to Baker Street, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just brushed against something immense. Holmes seemed entirely absorbed in his thoughts, his eyes gleaming with that peculiar brightness that only appeared when he faced a truly challenging case. "What do you make of all this, Holmes?" I asked, breaking the silence. "I think, Doctor, that we are on the verge of remarkable discoveries," he answered, "perhaps even ones that will alter our understanding of the past. But first, we must find the one behind this silk, and I fear time is against us." When we entered our sitting room, Holmes immediately turned to his collection of books and began sifting through volumes on Chinese history and ancient symbols. As for me, I sat at the table and started recording everything we had learned that evening. The mystery of the Chinese silk had only just begun, and I sensed it would become one of the most enigmatic cases we had ever encountered. Chapter 2: Shadows of the Past. The next morning, the fog over London had lifted, but it left behind a damp chill that seeped through even the thickest coats. In our sitting room at Baker Street, the usual bustle of work was underway. Holmes, as always, was deeply absorbed in his task. He had spread the silk roll across the table and was examining it intently with his magnifying glass. Beside him lay several ancient volumes he had retrieved from his extensive library. "Watson," he said without looking up, "have you ever heard of the Red Dragon?" I thought for a moment, but shook my head. "No, that's new to me." "Unsurprising," Holmes replied, lifting one of the books. "The Red Dragon is the name of an ancient Chinese society said to have existed as far back as the Tang Dynasty. Its members were tasked with protecting imperial relics and ancient knowledge. Legend has it their symbol was a dragon exactly like this one." He pointed to the embroidered beast on the silk. "But what's most intriguing is that they were also known for destroying anything that might fall into unworthy hands." "You mean this silk is connected to that society?" I asked, sensing the story growing ever more fascinating. "Precisely," Holmes answered. "And if I'm right, we're not merely dealing with smugglers, but with individuals who may be tied to something far older and far more dangerous." At that moment, a knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Hudson ushered in a short man of Eastern descent. His face was pale, his eyes filled with deep unease. He wore a plain grey suit that seemed at odds with his composed, dignified bearing. "Mr. Holmes?" he asked, stepping toward the table. "I am Li Din, the owner of the company that operates the warehouse where the silk was found." Holmes gestured for him to sit. "Tell me everything you know about this matter, Mr. Li," he said, studying the man closely. Li Din took a deep breath, as if steadying himself. "The fact is, about a month ago, a man approached me. A strange man. He introduced himself as an antiques dealer and offered to have a shipment of silk delivered from China. He said it was a special order for a wealthy collector. I agreed such deals bring good profit. But now I fear I've made a mistake." "Why?" Holmes asked. "Because soon after, odd things began happening," Li Din continued. "First, the ship's captain, who was to transport the cargo, vanished. Then one of my employees disappeared without a trace. And this morning, I received this." He drew a small envelope from his pocket and handed it to Holmes. Inside was a note written in the same neat script we had seen at the warehouse. This time, it bore a single word: **run. What does this mean?" I asked, sensing the tension in the room thicken. "A warning," Holmes replied, scrutinizing the note. Someone wants you out of the city, perhaps to ensure you don't witness something important. Li Din grew even paler. I don't understand what I've gotten myself into, Mr. Holmes, but I fear for my life. Your fear is justified, Holmes said. However, to help you, I need more information. Tell me about the man who arranged the silk delivery. What did he look like? What did he say? Li Din hesitated. He was tall, thin, with long black hair and sharp eyes. He spoke little, but his words carried a threat. He said if I fulfilled the order, I'd be rewarded handsomely. If not, the man fell silent, but his unspoken meaning was clear. Did you learn his name? Holmes pressed. No, Li Din shook his head. He only called himself the master. But I remember one detail. On his right hand, he had a strange scar shaped like a crescent moon. Holmes frowned. A crescent moon. Interesting. That could be a link. A link to what? I asked. To whoever is behind this, Holmes replied. Now we must find this master. But first, I'd like to examine your office, Mr. Li. There may be something there to advance our investigation. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Li Xin's office was located in London's business district, in an old building with high ceilings and heavy wooden doors. Holmes immediately began inspecting the premises, paying particular attention to documents and ledgers. I observed, taking notes. Ah, here's something interesting, Holmes said, pulling a small notebook from a desk drawer. It contained entries in Chinese, interspersed with occasional English words. Can you read it? I asked. Partially, Holmes replied. There are dates and names mentioned here, but the most crucial detail is the symbols at the end of each page. They match those embroidered on the silk. So it really is a key, I said. Yes, Holmes nodded. But a key to what? That is the question. Just then, another knock came at the door. Li Din opened it to reveal a young man holding a package. This is for you, sir, he said, handing it to Li Din. A courier delivered it an hour ago. Li Din took the package reluctantly, but Holmes stepped forward. Don't open it until I've examined it, he warned. But Li Din seemed not to hear. He tore open the wrapping, and a second silk roll tumbled to the floor. This time, instead of a dragon, it depicted a great bird with outstretched wings, its feathers covered in the same cryptic symbols. A phoenix, Holmes murmured, studying the fabric. Another piece of the puzzle. What does this mean? Li Din asked, teetering on the edge of panic. It means we're dealing with something far greater than mere smuggling, Holmes said. These symbols are parts of a map or a code leading to something immensely valuable, perhaps an ancient relic. But who are these people? I asked. And why leave such clues? Because they want us to find them, Holmes replied. The question is why. Perhaps we're being used as bait, or as leverage against someone else. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Upon our return to Baker Street, Holmes immediately set to deciphering the symbols. I sat nearby, reflecting on what we had stumbled into. This was no simple murder case. It was a mystery entwined with millennia of history and the secrets of ancient societies. Watson, Holmes suddenly said, looking up from his notes, have you ever heard of the dragon's necklace? No, I admitted. A legendary relic said to have been crafted by China's first emperor himself. It's rumored to grant its possessor power over the world, but its location has been lost for ages. You think these silk rolls are connected to the necklace? I asked. I'm certain of it, Holmes said, and I suspect those behind this affair are searching for it as well. But who are they? And what are they willing to do to obtain it? Chapter 3. Secrets of the Underground. The next morning, London was once again shrouded in fog, as if the city had decided to keep its secrets hidden a little longer. In our sitting room at Baker Street, Holmes sat at the table, deeply engrossed in studying the symbols from the silk rolls. Scattered before him were sheets of paper covered in his notes and sketches, alongside a cup of tea that had long gone cold, forgotten in his concentration. "Watson," he suddenly said, lifting his head, "I'm beginning to grasp the scale of this mystery. These symbols, they're not mere patterns. They're coordinates." "Coordinates," I repeated, stepping closer. "Are you saying they point to a specific location?" "Precisely," Holmes nodded. "If you examine the arrangement and sequence of these symbols carefully, it becomes clear they form a map. But here's what's interesting. This map doesn't lead to any place on the surface. It leads downward." "Downward?" I echoed in surprise. "You mean the underground tunnels?" "Yes," Holmes replied, rising from his chair. "London's subterranean passages. They hold countless secrets, old catacombs, abandoned tunnels, ancient vaults. And I suspect that's where what we're seeking is hidden." We made our way to Southwark, where Holmes's calculations indicated one of the key points on the map lay. Here, among aged buildings and shadowy alleys, entrances to long-forgotten underground passages could be found. The fog here was even thicker, and every step felt like a venture into the unknown. "Here it is," Holmes said, stopping before a crumbling archway that led into darkness. Faint symbols, resembling those embroidered on the silk, were barely visible on the stones. "Are you certain this is safe?" I asked, eyeing the ominous opening. "Safe," Holmes repeated with a slight smirk. "Since when has that ever stopped us?" He produced a lantern and stepped inside first. I followed, feeling the chill of the underground seep into my bones. The tunnel walls were slick with mold, and beneath our feet, the crunch of broken stones and occasional bones echoed unnervingly. Our footsteps reverberated through the corridors, amplifying the eerie atmosphere. "Look," Holmes suddenly said, directing the lantern's beam toward the wall. Carved into the stone were the same symbols as on the silk, but here they were larger and more intricate. Some even emitted a faint greenish glow. "What is that?" I asked, a shiver running down my spine. "Luminescent paint," Holmes explained, "used in ancient times to mark significant locations. We're on the right path." We pressed forward until we stood before a massive door adorned with a dragon relief. Its eyes were made of sun-polished stone that gleamed even in the dim lantern light. "A lock," Holmes murmured, pointing to an ancient but functional mechanism beside the door. He retrieved his magnifying glass, examining it closely before producing a set of lockpicks from his pocket. After a few minutes of meticulous work, a sharp click echoed through the tunnel like a gunshot in the silence. The door creaked open, revealing a vast cavern illuminated by an eerie blue light. At its center stood a stone altar, upon which rested an object wrapped in cloth. Beside it stood two figures in long, hooded cloaks that obscured their faces. "Mr. Holmes," one of them intoned in a low voice. "We've been expecting you." "Who are you?" Holmes asked, his tone calm, though I noticed his hand drift toward the pocket where he kept his revolver. "We are the keepers of secrets," the second figure replied. "And what lies before you belongs to us." "I'm afraid your claim to it is highly questionable," Holmes countered. "I believe this object is the legendary dragon's necklace. Yet history records it as lost centuries ago. How did it come to be here?" "It was never lost," the first figure said. "It was hidden to protect it from those who would wield its power for evil. But now the time has come, and it must be returned to its true owner." "And who is that?" I demanded, unable to stay silent any longer. "That is no concern of yours," the second figure replied, stepping forward. "Leave now, while you still can. We mean you no harm, but we will not allow interference." "I'm afraid that's impossible," Holmes said coolly. "I will not stop until I uncover the full truth." At that, one of the keepers made a sharp gesture. A deep rumble shook the cavern, and stones began to rain from the ceiling. The ground trembled beneath our feet. "Run!" Holmes shouted, grabbing my arm. We sprinted back through the tunnel as the passage collapsed behind us. When we burst onto the surface, a thunderous explosion sounded, sealing the entrance beneath a mountain of rubble. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Back at Baker Street, covered in dust and grime, Holmes's eyes burned with exhilaration. "Now we know what we're dealing with," he said, unfurling the map we had found earlier. "But this is only the beginning. Those people, they're part of something far larger. An ancient society guarding secrets, perhaps. But the question remains, whom do they serve? And what do they intend to do with the necklace?" I added. "That," Holmes said, "is what we must uncover next. But one thing is certain. This case will prove to be among the most challenging of my career." Chapter 4. Shadows in the Fog. Several days passed in tense silence after our return to Baker Street. Holmes, as usual, buried himself in work, studying maps of London, ancient books about secret societies and Chinese legends, while filling endless pages of his notebook. I could sense we stood on the brink of something monumental, though the full picture still eluded me. The calm, however, was short-lived. One evening, as the fog once again draped the city in its thick veil, a knock sounded at our door. Mrs. Hudson ushered into our sitting room a tall man in a long black coat. His face was hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and his gloved hands gripped a cane with a heavy silver knob. "Mr. Holmes," he spoke in a deep voice, removing his hat. Before us stood a man in his 50s with sharp features and piercing dark eyes. A thin scar ran down his right cheek, lending him an even more sinister air. "Indeed, that is I," Holmes replied, studying our visitor closely. "And you, by all appearances, must be the so-called Master Mr. Li Din told us about." The man smiled faintly, revealing unnaturally white teeth. "You are well informed, Mr. Holmes. But allow me to introduce myself properly. Richard Wordsworth, collector of antiquities and specialist in lost artifacts. And I presume you are connected to the events surrounding the dragon's necklace?" Holmes asked, gesturing to the chair opposite. Wordsworth sat, resting the cane across his knees. "Let us be frank, Mr. Holmes. I know you are close to uncovering the truth. You found the underground chamber, you encountered the keepers. But allow me to ask, why interfere? This matter concerns neither you nor your friend. I'm afraid I cannot remain idle when faced with a mystery of this magnitude," Holmes countered, "especially one involving murder and dangerous individuals." "Murder?" Wordsworth raised an eyebrow. "Ah, regrettable, but inevitable. When power like that of the dragon's necklace is at stake, there will always be those willing to do anything. But I come not with threats. I come with a proposition." "What sort of proposition?" I asked, unable to mask my surprise. "I want you to help me find the necklace," Wordsworth said. "In return, I guarantee your safety and generous compensation." Holmes let out a short, cold laugh. "You truly believe I would collaborate with a man implicated in smuggling and possibly murder?" "I am no murderer, Mr. Holmes," Wordsworth replied, his voice hardening. "Merely a man reclaiming what is rightfully his. And you? You are but a detective who enjoys solving puzzles. Why not join forces?" "Because I do not work with those whose methods defy both law and morality," Holmes retorted. "And now that I know your name, it will be far easier to uncover who you truly are." Wordsworth rose slowly, his eyes glinting like ice. "A pity, Mr. Holmes. But know this, continue down this path, and you risk not only yourself, but your friend as well. Think on that." With that, he turned and left, the faint scent of expensive cologne lingering behind him. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. What do you make of him?" I asked once the door closed. "He is dangerous, Watson," Holmes answered, drawing the curtains. "But he is also knowledgeable. If we can use him as a source of information, it may prove useful." "You believe he means to act against us?" I asked, feeling the tension coil tighter. Undoubtedly, Holmes nodded. Men like him do not take refusal lightly. But we now have the advantage. He doesn't realize how close we are to the truth. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The next morning, we went to the British Museum, where Holmes believed ancient Chinese artifacts might hold clues to the necklace's symbolism. In the Oriental Antiquities section, we were greeted by an old acquaintance of Holmes, Dr. Edward Grimsley, an expert on Asian cultures. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson. He adjusted his spectacles. How may I assist you? We seek information on the Red Dragon and their symbols, Holmes said. Anything that could help decipher these markings. Grimsley pondered momentarily before retrieving an ancient manuscript from a cabinet. This text was discovered in a cave in China. It references the Red Dragon and their relics. It may be what you need. Holmes examined the manuscript intently, his eyes alight with recognition. Here, he pointed to a specific symbol. This is the key. Now I know where we must go. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. As we left the museum, we were ambushed. 3 figures emerged from the fog, their faces obscured by scarves. They moved with lethal precision, clearly intent on capturing us. Watson, stand ready, Holmes shouted, drawing his revolver. I followed suit, and we fired. Gunshots echoed through the streets, but our assailants were relentless. Yet Holmes, ever the marksman, forced them to retreat with well-placed shots. With me, he grabbed my arm. We fled through alleys until reaching safety. There, Holmes unfolded a map, studying it intently. They know we're close, he said. But we now have the final piece. We must go to Westminster Abbey. Why there? I asked. Because that is where the last clue lies, Holmes replied. And I am certain it holds the answers we seek. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Past in Stone Walls. Westminster Abbey greeted us with its majestic gloom. The ancient walls, steeped in history, seemed even more mysterious under the veil of night fog. We didn't enter through the main gate, but through a narrow side door that Holmes picked open with his lockpick. His skill in such matters always filled me with admiration, though not without a twinge of concern for the legality of our actions. Watson, remember, we are not here to disturb the sanctity of this place, Holmes whispered as we carefully navigated the dark corridors. We need to find one particular chapel. If my calculations are correct, that's where the final piece of the puzzle lies. But how did you deduce this place is connected to the dragon's necklace? I asked, stepping as quietly as possible. The symbols from Grimsley's manuscript point to geometric markers that align with the Abbey's layout, he replied. The Abbey isn't just a religious site. It also served as a repository for ancient artifacts during the Crusades. It's possible one of the knights or merchants brought the necklace here to hide it. We found ourselves in a long corridor adorned with stained glass windows that cast eerie shadows even in the darkness. The silence was almost tangible, broken only by our footsteps and the occasional flutter of bats nesting in the ancient vaults. Asterisk, 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 here it is, Holmes suddenly said, stopping before a small chapel nearly indistinguishable from the others. Faint symbols, similar to those on the silk rolls, were barely visible on its arch. Holmes took out his magnifying glass and began examining the carvings closely. His fingers traced the cold stone as if reading a story written in invisible ink. This is what I was looking for, he said, pointing to one of the symbols. There's a mechanism here. He pressed the stone depicting a dragon, and a quiet click echoed through the chapel. A section of the wall slid aside, revealing a hidden passage. A draft of damp, ancient air rushed out, as though we had disturbed the slumber of centuries. After you, Holmes said, handing me the lantern. We descended a narrow staircase leading underground. The walls were covered in strange drawings and inscriptions, executed in a technique I had never seen before. Every line seemed to carry meaning, "This is the work of the Red Dragon," Holmes murmured, running his hand along one of the inscriptions. "They were true masters of their craft. And these symbols, they point to something greater than just a map." "What exactly?" I asked, feeling the tension rise. "I'm not certain yet," he admitted. "But if my suspicions are correct, we're standing in one of their ancient vaults." At the end of the corridor, we found a small chamber illuminated by a soft glow emanating from a peculiar crystal mounted on a stone pedestal. Beside it lay a third silk roll, depicting a massive dragon entwined with a phoenix. Beneath it were lines of text in ancient Chinese. "This is a message," Holmes said, pulling out his notebook to transcribe the symbols. "If translated correctly, it will reveal the necklace's location." But before he could continue, the sound of footsteps echoed behind us. A figure emerged from the shadows, one of the keepers we had encountered in the underground tunnels. This time, his face was partially illuminated by the crystal's light, revealing deep wrinkles and cold, piercing eyes. "You have gone too far, Mr. Holmes," he said in flawless English. "This place is not for you." "I'm not here to disturb your peace," Holmes replied calmly. "I'm here for the truth." "The truth is dangerous," the keeper said, "especially when it concerns the dragon's necklace. Do you know what it can do?" "I know it is a source of power," Holmes countered. "But who decides how to wield it? You, Wordsworth, or someone else?" The keeper slowly shook his head. "You don't understand. It is not merely power. It is a key balance between our world and others. If misused, the consequences would be catastrophic." "So you admit it exists?" Holmes pressed. "Yes," the keeper said. "But now that you know, you have become part of the game. And the choice you make will determine the fate of many." At that moment, a loud explosion rocked the abbey above us, and the walls trembled. The keeper glanced away for just a second, long enough for Holmes to snatch the silk roll. "Run!" he shouted, grabbing my arm. We sprinted back through the corridor, footsteps and unfamiliar voices closing in behind us. When we emerged from the underground passage, we found the abbey surrounded by armed men. At their forefront stood Richard Wordsworth himself. "Mr. Holmes," he said with a cold smile, "I warned you that you had no choice." Holmes, however, showed no fear. He stepped forward, holding the silk roll aloft. "You want this?" he asked. "Then you'll have to negotiate, or I destroy it right now." Wordsworth froze, his eyes flashing with anger. "You wouldn't dare," he hissed. "You love solving puzzles too much." "Test me," Holmes replied, his voice so firm that even I wondered if he was bluffing. Back at Baker Street, Holmes immediately set to deciphering the text from the third silk roll. I sat nearby, sensing we stood on the brink of something extraordinary. "Watson," he suddenly said, looking up, "I know where it is. The dragon's necklace is hidden in a place known only to the keepers. But now we have all the pieces. And where do we go next?" I asked. "To China," Holmes answered. "To the ancient city of Xi'an. That's where the final key lies." Chapter 6. Journey to the Ancient World. The next morning found us in Holmes' study, discussing the details of our journey. Before us lay a map of China covered in markings and symbols that only Holmes seemed capable of deciphering. "Xi'an is China's oldest city," he said, pointing to the map. "It was once the capital of the Tang Empire and houses the famous tomb of the first Emperor Qin Shi Huang with his terracotta army. But it's more than just a historical center. There are underground temples and tunnels known only to select few." "You believe the dragon's necklace is hidden there?" I asked. "Precisely," Holmes nodded. "All the symbols we've seen point to this region. But be prepared, this won't be a simple journey. Wordsworth may be one step ahead, and the keepers will likely try to stop us by any means necessary." We departed for the docks to board our ship to China. The weather was gloomy, the air heavy with the scent of sea and coal. The pier bustled with merchants, sailors and passengers, all attending to their business. Yet amid this commotion, I spotted a familiar figure, a tall man in a long coat standing apart, watching us. "Watson," Holmes whispered, having noticed him too, one of Wordsworth's men. "Stay alert." We boarded the Queen of the East, an impressive three-masted vessel with luxurious passenger cabins. Though our quarters were spacious, Holmes immediately began arranging his notes and instruments, as if even at sea he couldn't permit himself rest. The first days passed uneventfully. We spent our time studying the symbols and discussing possible scenarios awaiting us in Xi'an. However, on the third day something unexpected occurred. As we sat in the ship's common room, a man of Eastern appearance approached us. His face was calm but his eyes betrayed anxiety. "Mr. Holmes," he addressed my friend. "I am Li Din, Mr. Li," I exclaimed in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "I couldn't remain in London," he replied. "Those men, they found me. They wanted to know what I'd told you. I barely escaped. Now I believe the only way to protect myself is to help you find the necklace." Holmes studied him carefully. "You risk your life by involving yourself further, Mr. Li. But if you truly wish to help, your knowledge may prove valuable." Our meeting with Li Din didn't go unnoticed. That very night, as we prepared for bed, we heard the quiet creak of our door opening. Holmes, ever vigilant, immediately grabbed his revolver and aimed at the entrance. "Don't move," he commanded. The man in the coat we'd seen at the docks stood in the doorway, to others visible behind him. "Mr. Holmes," he said coldly, "you needn't continue this journey. Hand over the silk scrolls and we'll leave you in peace." "I'm afraid that's impossible," Holmes replied. "If you want them, you'll have to take them by force." The attackers advanced, but Holmes was quicker. His shot struck the wall beside one man's head. The gunfire alarmed the ship, and soon sailors appeared in the corridors. "With me," Holmes cried, grabbing my arm. We burst onto the deck into the fresh night air. Our pursuers followed, but Holmes, as always, stayed steps ahead. He knew the ship intimately and quickly found us refuge. "Watson," he whispered, "we must reach the captain's quarters. There are weapons and documents that may aid us." When we arrived at the captain's cabin, Li Din awaited us, a small dagger ready in his hand. "They're coming," he warned. "Then we'll make our stand," Holmes replied, reloading his revolver. Minutes later, the attackers forced their way in. A fierce struggle ensued. Li Din fought with remarkable skill while Holmes, as ever, acted with precision. Soon our assailants retreated, leaving only shadows in the night. The next morning, the ship's captain summoned us. Though displeased by the incident, Holmes convinced him we'd acted in self-defense. "A few days remain until Xi'an," Holmes said when we returned to our cabin. "But now we know Wordsworth won't stop until he gets what he wants. We must be prepared for anything." "What do you think will happen when we find the necklace?" I asked. "That depends on who reaches it first," Holmes replied. "But one thing is certain, this story is far from over." Chapter 7. Shadows of the Ancient City. When we finally arrived in Xi'an, the city greeted us with its majestic atmosphere and ancient walls that seemed to hold millennia of history within them. The air was filled with the scent of spices and smoke from cooking fires, while the narrow streets steamed with merchants, pilgrims, and tourists who had come from all over the world to see the legendary terracotta army. We settled in a small inn on the outskirts of the city where we could avoid unnecessary attention. Holmes immediately spread out the maps and notes we had brought with us and began formulating our plan. "The first thing we must do," he said, pointing to an ancient blueprint he had retrieved from his portfolio, "is find the entrance to the underground tunnels. According to the symbols we saw on the silk, it's located somewhere near the Dekun Temple. But we must proceed cautiously. The keepers know this region like the back of their hand. What about Wordsworth? I asked. Do you think he's already here? Without a doubt, Holmes replied. He's not the kind of man to allow himself to fall behind. But his men are lying low for now. They're waiting for the right moment. The next morning, we set out for the Decum Temple, located on the city's outskirts. It was an old structure with intricately carved pillars and a red-tiled roof. Two massive stone dragon statues stood guard at the entrance, their eyes made of polished jade gleaming even in the dim daylight. Holmes carefully examined the statues, then took out his magnifying glass and studied their bases. Here it is, he said, pointing to a barely noticeable symbol engraved on the pedestal of one of the dragons. This is the key. He pressed one of the stones, and a quiet click sounded. The ground beneath us trembled slightly, and a section of the wall beside the statue slid aside, revealing a dark passage. "Follow me," Holmes said, retrieving his lantern. We descended a narrow staircase leading underground. The air here was cold and damp, and the walls were covered with carvings resembling those we had seen in Westminster Abbey. Ahead, a faint light emanated from a strange crystal mounted on a stone altar. At the center of the underground chamber, we were met with a surprise. Another silk scroll lay on the altar, and beside it stood a man in a long coat, none other than the master we had encountered in London, Richard Wordsworth himself. "Mr. Holmes," he said with a cold smile, "as I anticipated, you couldn't resist the opportunity to solve this puzzle." "I'm not here for your games, Wordsworth," Holmes replied. "I'm here for the truth." "The truth," Wordsworth repeated, stepping closer. "The truth is that the dragon's necklace holds power beyond your comprehension. It can change the world. And now that all the pieces of the puzzle are assembled, only one question remains: who will become its guardian?" "And you, of course, believe it should be you?" I asked, feeling the tension rise. "Why not?" Wordsworth countered. "I've spent years searching for this artifact. I'm prepared to wield its power for the good of mankind." "For the good?" Holmes echoed with a slight smirk. "Or to satisfy your own ambitions?" Wordsworth froze for a moment, his eyes flashing with anger. "You don't understand, Mr. Holmes. This world is too weak to withstand chaos. It needs a leader who can restore order. And I am precisely the man who can do that." At that moment, footsteps echoed, and several keepers emerged from the shadows. Their faces were hidden beneath hoods, but their movements exuded confidence. "You have gone too far," one of them said. "This place is not for you." "Nor is it for you," Holmes retorted. "If you think you can stop us, you are sorely mistaken." The tension in the air thickened. It seemed everyone present was waiting for a signal to act. But Holmes, as always, was one step ahead. "Watson," he whispered, "take the silk scroll. I'll distract them." I quickly grabbed the scroll while Holmes stepped forward, drawing everyone's attention. "Do you truly believe you can defeat us?" he asked, drawing his revolver. "You have a choice. Either allow us to continue our investigation, or we destroy everything connected to the necklace. And believe me, I am not bluffing." Wordsworth hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "You're lying," he said. "Care to test that?" Holmes replied, raising his revolver. At that moment, a powerful explosion rocked the chamber from above, and the ground trembled. Part of the ceiling collapsed, creating debris. The keepers and Wordsworth were momentarily distracted, giving Holmes and me the chance to escape. "Run!" he shouted, grabbing my arm. We sprinted back through the corridor, the sounds of shouting and crumbling stone echoing behind us. When we emerged above ground, we found the entrance to the underground passage completely blocked. "They'll be trapped there for at least a few hours," Holmes said, catching his breath. "That should give us enough time to find the final key." Back at the inn, we unrolled the new silk scroll. It depicted a massive dragon entwined with a phoenix, beneath which were lines of text in ancient Chinese. This message points to the location of the necklace, Holmes said, carefully studying the symbols. But to decipher it, we'll need the help of a local expert. Who? I asked. Professor Joe, Holmes replied. He's one of the foremost scholars of ancient texts in this region. If anyone can help us, it's him. Chapter 8. The Final Key. The next morning, we set out to find Professor Joe. According to Holmes' notes, he lived in an old house on the city outskirts near ancient ruins that had once been part of an imperial palace. The journey took nearly an hour. We walked through narrow alleys past bustling markets where merchants loudly advertised their wares, then through deserted areas where only the wind whispered through grass growing among crumbling walls. When we finally reached the professor's house, we found it surrounded by tall trees as if nature itself sought to hide this place from prying eyes. The house was old, but well kept, with tightly closed wooden shutters and two stone lion statues guarding the entrance. Holmes knocked on the massive wooden door, which opened after several minutes. A short man with a grey beard and penetrating eyes that immediately fixed on us stood in the doorway. Professor Joe, my friend inquired with a slight bow. Indeed, he replied in flawless English. How may I help you? My name is Sherlock Holmes, and this is my friend Dr. Watson. We're here regarding a most important matter concerning ancient texts and symbols. We require your assistance. Joe studied us carefully before gesturing inside. Come in. The interior resembled a veritable museum of antiquities. Shelves overflowed with ancient books, scrolls, figurines, and other artifacts. The air carried scents of old paper and incense. What precisely is this about? The professor asked, indicating low chairs for us. Holmes produced the silk scroll and spread it on the table. This message is written in ancient Chinese. We believe it indicates the location of the dragon's necklace, a legendary relic said to possess tremendous power. Joe examined the text closely, his eyes narrowing. You know of what you speak, he said after a long silence. This text is indeed connected to the ancient Red Dragon Society. But you must understand this isn't merely history. It's a reality that could prove dangerous to those who meddle with it. We're prepared to take that risk, Holmes replied, but we need your help deciphering this text. The professor nodded and retrieved an old leather-bound book. Comparing symbols and making notes, he finally looked up. It's complex, he said, but if I understand correctly, this points to a place called the Hall of Nine Mirrors, an ancient underground chamber near Mountley. The Hall of Nine Mirrors, I repeated. Yes, Joe nodded. Legends say the first Emperor Qin Shi Huang built it to protect his most valuable relics. They say mirrors there show not just reflections, but truth. Truth? Holmes asked, clearly intrigued. Indeed, the professor replied. But be warned, those who entered often never returned, or came back, changed. After thanking the professor, we returned to the city to prepare for our journey to Mountley. However, halfway there we were intercepted again. 3 men in long coats, the keepers we'd encountered before he emerged from the shadows. Mr. Holmes, one said, you needn't continue this journey. Surrender the scroll and we'll let you leave. I'm afraid that's impossible, Holmes replied, drawing his revolver. If you want it, you'll have to take it by force. As the attackers advanced, Holmes fired a warning shot. The gunshot echoed through the streets, drawing local residents. With me, Holmes grabbed my arm. We fled through alleys until reaching safety where Holmes consulted our map. We're close, Watson, he said. The Hall of Nine Mirrors is the final piece. Find it, and we find the necklace. At dawn we set out for Mountley. The steep trail took us past ancient ruins and bamboo thickets. Reaching the summit, we discovered a cave entrance hidden behind a waterfall. There it is, Holmes said, shining his lantern inside. The Hall of Nine Mirrors. The cave opened into a vast chamber with 9 enormous mirrors of polished metal that created an illusion of infinite reflections. "Look," I pointed to the central pedestal where lay the necklace, a dragon coiled around a jade disc. "The dragon's necklace," Holmes breathed, stepping forward. But as he reached for it, a voice commanded, "Don't move." We turned to see Richard Wordsworth in the cave entrance, revolver in hand. "You've gone too far, Mr. Holmes," he said. "The necklace is mine now." "You're mistaken," Holmes replied. "This isn't your destiny." "Then whose is it?" Wordsworth's eyes gleamed coldly. Suddenly one mirror began glowing, revealing the keeper's reflections. "You've disturbed the balance," one spoke. "Now all must pay the price." Chapter 9. Mirrors of Truth. The tension in the air became almost tangible. We stood at the center of the hall of 9 mirrors, surrounded by strange reflections and the mystical atmosphere of this ancient place. Richard Wordsworth still held us at gunpoint, his revolver trained squarely on Holmes. But now the keepers had joined him, their silhouettes appearing in the mirrors, as though observing us from another dimension. "What does this mean?" Wordsworth demanded, his voice trembling for the first time since we'd met him. "Who are these people?" "Those who guard the balance," answered one keeper, stepping through a mirror. His figure appeared translucent, as if merely a shadow of his true self. "And you have broken their rules." "I don't fear your threats," Wordsworth said, struggling to maintain composure. "I came here for power. Power to change the world." "The world has changed many times by those who craved power," the keeper replied, "each time ending in chaos. You are no exception." Holmes, who had been silently observing, suddenly stepped forward. "If I understand correctly," he said, "this hall wasn't built merely to protect the necklace. It's meant to show every visitor the true nature of their intentions. Am I right?" The keeper nodded. "Indeed. The mirrors don't lie. They reflect not just appearances, but souls. Should someone intend to use the necklace for evil, it will destroy them." Wordsworth laughed a cold, mirthless laugh. "These are just legends. I don't believe your fairy tales." "Then test it," the keeper said, pointing to a mirror. "Look into it." Wordsworth hesitated, but curiosity won out. He approached the mirror slowly and peered in. His face immediately changed, his eyes widened, his lips trembled. He staggered back, as if seeing something horrifying. "No, no," he screamed, clutching his head. "This can't be." "What do you see?" I asked, feeling the tension rise. My own thoughts," Wordsworth whispered. "What I truly wanted, but never realized how terrible it was." The keeper turned to us. "Now you understand why the necklace can't be entrusted to just anyone. It amplifies what already exists within a person. Darkness in the heart becomes all-consuming." Holmes stepped forward, his eyes flashing with determination. "What if I look into the mirror?" he asked. "Are you certain?" The keeper replied. "Not everyone can bear the truth about themselves." "I must know," Holmes answered. He approached the mirror and gazed in. For several seconds he stood motionless, then stepped back slowly. His face remained calm, but his eyes revealed deep contemplation. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Most fascinating." "What did you see?" I asked. "What I've always known about myself," Holmes replied, "only clearer now. I cannot wield the necklace. My destiny is to seek truth, not possess it." The keeper nodded. "You are wiser than most. But now you must choose. What will you do with the necklace?" At that moment, Wordsworth suddenly lunged for the pedestal, grabbed the necklace and clasped it around his neck. "Now it's mine," he screamed. "No one can stop me." But as soon as the necklace touched his skin, something strange occurred. The jade disc began glowing bright green, and the coiled dragon seemed to come alive. Wordsworth shrieked as his body began contorting, as though the necklace was draining his life force. "No!" he screamed, clawing at it, but the necklace appeared fused to his flesh. It amplifies what lies within you, the keeper said. Your lust for power has become your curse. Within seconds, Wordsworth collapsed to the floor, his body crumbling to dust as the necklace returned to the pedestal. We stared silently at where Wordsworth had stood. The keepers began disappearing one by one, returning to their mirrors. Now you understand that power doesn't always bring control, the last keeper said before vanishing into the air. Holmes approached the pedestal and studied the necklace intently. What will you do? I asked. Leave it here, he replied. This place was made to protect such relics. We can't risk anyone else attempting to claim it. I nodded, understanding his decision. We left the cave, leaving the necklace where it belonged, safeguarded by ancient forces. During our return to London, I couldn't stop reflecting on what we'd experienced. This journey had changed us both. Holmes remained characteristically silent, but I noticed he'd grown even more contemplative. Do you think, I asked, what might have happened had someone else found the necklace? Who can say, Watson, he answered, but I'm certain the world is better off without such artifacts. Let them remain mysteries of the past. Chapter 10. Epilogue. Shadows fade. When we returned to London, the city greeted us with its familiar fog and bustle. After the events in China, everything seemed almost mundane, but I knew this feeling was deceptive. Our journey had left a deep mark not only in our memories, but in our souls as well. We found ourselves once more in our sitting room at Baker Street. Holmes, as usual, reclined on his favorite sofa with his pipe in hand, releasing smoke rings that slowly dissolved into the air. I sat at the table, recording the final events of our story for future publication. Watson, Holmes suddenly said, drawing me from my writing, have you ever considered that truth can be more dangerous than lies? I paused before answering. I suppose so, especially when that truth concerns something as ancient and powerful as the dragon's necklace. Precisely, he nodded. Sometimes people will go to any lengths for power or knowledge without realizing the cost. The necklace is a perfect example. Wordsworth was an intelligent man, but his ambitions blinded him. He didn't understand that true power lies not in possession, but in comprehending the consequences of one's actions. What about us? I asked. We sought the truth too. Hasn't it changed us? Holmes smiled his enigmatic smile. Of course it has, but the difference is we sought truth not for power, but for understanding. And perhaps that's what saved us. At that moment, a knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Hudson ushered in Lee Din, who looked markedly better than during our last meeting. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, he said with a bow. I wish to thank you for everything you've done. Thanks to you, I've been able to return to a normal life. My business in London is concluded, and I'll soon return to China. I'm glad to hear it, Mr. Lee, Holmes replied. Do take care. The world is full of dangers, especially for those who know too much. Lee Din nodded. I'll remember your words. But before I go, I wanted to leave you with this. He drew a small package from his pocket and placed it on the table. Inside was a piece of silk embroidered with a dragon symbol. A reminder that the mysteries of the past always remain with us, he said. Keep it as a token of what you've experienced. Holmes took the silk and examined it carefully. Thank you, Mr. Lee. I shall keep it as a memento of our adventure. After Li Xin's departure, I continued my writing, striving to preserve every detail of this remarkable story. When I finished, Holmes approached and placed a hand on my shoulder. Close this chapter, Watson, he said. Some stories should remain only as memories. We found what we sought, and now we may move forward. You're right, I replied, shutting my notebook. But do you know what astonishes me most? That even after all this, the world around us remains as mysterious as ever. Holmes laughed. Precisely why we shall never stop seeking answers, Watson. As long as questions exist, There will always be those who strive to solve them. The fog outside began to dissipate, revealing London's grey rooftops. Our adventure with the dragon's necklace had ended, but I knew this was just one of many stories we would yet experience. For the world remains full of mysteries, and for men like Sherlock Holmes, they will always present challenges too compelling to ignore. This is the end of our story, dear friends. If you enjoyed this Sherlock Holmes adventure, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel and share your impressions in the comments. Your support helps us create even more fascinating stories.